Hi, my name is Erick Carcamo. I'm a principal co-founder of All Platform. I'm also a professor at Woodbury University School of Architecture. Welcome to this introduction to Live Academy intermediate class covering MASH network nodes in Maya software. In the following tutorial, I will cover the basic understandings of MASH network nodes in the software using animation techniques in order to manipulate a more complex geometry.
So I'm going to press play so you can see some of the information that is coming along. It's coming from the MASH networks, and I can explain to you how we got to this point from this point forward. Now, I am using animations, as you can see, playing and stop. And I can also use other set of parameters here that are basically connected to the MASH networks and to a full architectural and geometrical approach. In this case, I'm using a cube as a platonic solid in order to operate on it. But for the class, later on, we can use any other type of geometry. Okay, so let me now open a new file. All right, so what we can do here is to start with understanding what a MASH network is. So we're going to start by using some polygon modeling and a quick understanding of animations. Second, let me make a cube here. Okay, so let's look at it. One simple cube. I'm going to go into MASH. These are the different tabs in Maya software. Under MASH, you will find one here at the corner that says Create MASH Network. As soon as you press that, let me also open a outliner so we can see the different entities in the scene. We have a p cube 1 at the beginning, and notice that it is now hidden, which is a dark gray. p cube 1 is the first object that we created. Now, in order to create what is called a repro mesh here, which is this, you have to create a MASH network. So once you do that, the original cube, it is hidden from what you see here. And now you create a MASH network, which in this case is putting it as MASH 1. Now, what MASH allows you to do is to play around and create a, as I said, a much complex understanding of geometries and their network intersections that you can apply into architectural techniques like skins, massing, and so on, or even structural aspects of it. So this intro to MASH, we're simply going to go through a lot of these, or let's say a few of these nodes, what I call the nodes. It says here, add node. And what are the effects of what it creates. So right away, as you create a MASH network, as I said, you make a MASH repro. Once you select this, it has its own settings, right? So under MASH repro 1, you can see what is the object that it's made of that MASH repro. Now, this is going to make a little more sense once I start playing with it. Automatically, let me just move these tabs a bit. Automatically under MASH 1, you have MASH 1 distribute. Now, notice here that I have 10 cubes coming from my PQ1. And these are what they call points. So I can also increase these points. Now this is actually just distributing a set of cubes, in this case P cube 1, into a linear distribution. Now you have different types of linear distribution, and the most important to understand is the amount of points that you have, the type of distribution, and also you can play with all the parameters of distance x, distance y, rotations, and scales. So let's try a few different distribution types. So that's linear. So you can see it's going in one direction. Sorry. If you unselect it, you can go ahead and press MASH again. MASH distribute. I have 10 distributions. Let me turn on under shading, wireframe on shading, so we can see a bit more clear. And you have the distance between the objects. Okay, by default, it's in the x direction, 20. There's a certain offset if you want to have offset. You can have a distance in the other direction, in the y direction. You can have a rotation in the x, in the y, and in the z. You can also have scales. This is a bit more clear right here. So again, I can add more. I can add rotations. If I add more of these, I can add more rotations. 0 to 360. Those are the different scales. If I don't want them to intersect or ghost, then I can just increase the distance between them. But let's keep that at 20. And let's keep this about the 20 as well. Let's now see what a radial distribution is. The radius, the angle, right? 360. And there's an offset as well. So this is more like a spiral effect. And you can also choose the radial axis. In this case, it's put at X and Y. You can do YZ or ZX. Again, you can increase the amounts, the scale of this, so on. Then we can go to spherical. In this case, the amount of points or cubes in that case, it matters to create a sphere. And this is the radius of that sphere. So I can fill this up like this. You can also have what is called a mesh distribution. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. So let's start with a grid. The grid is saying the distance, it's 5 units. We can go more. And I can add how many do I want and in what axis. Again, I'm distributing this. Let's say if I choose a number here, 15 by 15 by 15. Let's do all 15. Go to wireframe so I can see my distribution of objects is in there. I'm going to turn this down to just the distribution across and the X and the Y. Sorry, X and the Z, nothing in the Y. I'm going to go ahead and my MASH network. I'm going to put this one in a layer. And I'm going to call it MASH Repro 1. Save that, turn that off. Then I'm going to open my cube and I'm going to unhide it. The shortcut for that is Shift-H. Or you can go to Display, Show Selection. Since I have it selected through here, I can do Show Selection. I'm going to do a little bit of modeling to this just to have a variation. I'm going to add assign favorite material blend. I'm going to make that kind of grayish. I want to make an extrusion here. Bit random. On that face, I'm going to add a material blend. Go red. These faces, I'll add a different material. I'll do those black. And I'm going to do here a wedge face. Before I do that, let me just choose multi, choose the edge with shift, choose the face, shift right click, wedge. It's the wedge angle and there's some division, but I'll leave it at 1. So we can have some kind of variation in the geometry that we're trying to work on. So like this. And I'm going to take these at the bottom and I'm going to add the red as well. But let's turn on my repro mesh in my layers. So now notice that everything has changed. Let me turn that off. Or let me just select my cube, original cube, move it to the side. And you can see this changing in real time. I'm also going to select this and go to harden edges. So we see clearly a bit more of those edges. Okay, I'm going to hide this. That is Control H. Now you can see that it's hidden. And we're going to start using now a few mesh nodes under the attribute editor. Okay, so let me show you a few of the different nodes. Let's look at an influence node, which is here. The way you apply these nodes into this, you basically have to select the mesh network that you are. The reason I say you select the mesh network is because sometimes you'll be making 1 or 2 or 3. You can have as many as you want, but let's go step by step and by order. So let's look at mesh 1. Click on the influence or any of the nodes, in this case influence, and automatically it's going to say add influence node. So I'm just going to click on that. This particular node automatically makes a an influencer, let's say, here, which is an object here in the outliner, which is called mesh1 influence. Now, this is an object that you can see here. Let me press 4. You can see there's a little pink object here. Press 5. That's the object there. Now, as soon as I select that, my attributes for that object changes. So this tells you the scale of that object and the position, right? So it's simply an object in space. But I wanna play a bit more with the influencer as the parameters, right? So as soon as I select MASH on the outliner here, notice on my right, I have MASH one selected, and then I have the different tabs, which includes the distribute of the beginning, which is a grid, and also the influencer. So now the influence, what it does, it creates this kind of scale and descale, right? So this is the influence power. This is the radius of how much, see, if I go to 0, how much that appears. The strength of that. So if I go to 0, there's no strength to that influencer. And then you have I also have a random strength, which means that it works, but at a random pace. And the step, it's basically turns them on and off. So we're going to keep the step at a strength 1. Let's look back at the influence node, this object. So I'm going to go to R. I'm going to press R for scale. And what I'm doing here, I'm simply scaling that object. You can see I can scale it this way. For now, I'm just scaling it in a vertical direction. Go to my MASH, influence, and see how much of that influence do I have. You can see here, or the radius of that. I'm going to go a smaller radius, just the right combination. Or depends on what you want. You also have again, the random. So I'm going to try to move this around a bit. You can see that this is changing as I move around my object. Now again, I could go pretty high with that scale. And I can move this around. I can also go to MASH. Select MASH from here. Distribute. And I can add more to my distribution. So let's double that. 30, 30. And the distance between them, it's already set. You can see that I can change that scale if I want. Let's leave it at 15. So now that I move my object, again, I'm just moving this object. It's giving me that distribution. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to open on the tab menu here under the MASH, I'm going to open a MASH editor, which is this icon over here. Now, in this one, it's just going to show you your MASH, your influencer, and your distribute, which is the default, the original one. Now, I can turn this off and off right here. If I just turn that off, then it becomes that. Turn it on, then it has that influencer. On and off. It's as simple as that. So now, let me add a different node. So I'm going to go to offset node. Okay. Now remember, I turned off my influence one, so it's off. So now I'm using my offset, and the offset basically has the types of offsets that you have that enables the position rotation, which is here. Every time you see in my 3 boxes, this goes to X, Y, and Z. So if I have a offset rotation, I'm going to type this 90 degrees. Notice that the whole thing rotated 90 degrees. I'm going to undo that. There's a shortcut for this. You can also go to Control and click and drag side to side, and you can see that this is changing automatically. Now, let's say I don't want the whole thing to rotate. I want just specific areas to rotate. So what I can do with that, I'm going to go to Fall Off Object, right click on it, and I'm going to create a fall off. Now this fall off, it's basically a small sphere, a spherical, let's call it as an influencer in the geometry. And now I'm able to change this to, let's try rotation. Turn that to 0. Well, let's do 180 rotation. There's also the position. I'm going to turn this back to 0. Let's do the z-axis. So you can see now that these are rotating. They are rotating as I go and pass my influence. Now I can scale this, the fall off object. I can increase it in this direction. Now remember, these are overlapping because of the amount in my distribution, but let's leave it like this for now. I'm going to go across. I can also go to under my offset. If I go to my fall off object, I can do a sphere or I can do a cube. As you can see there. I can do the scale of that cube a bit less. I can also have a fall off ramp, which I can go to smooth. Do that to smooth. So I can see what's the influence ramp that I can have here. See, that relates to this particular. That goes 100%. Like this, or do that one smooth. I'll do that. I also can do a NURBS curve, right? I don't have a curve here at the moment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to curves. I'm going to make a circle, which is right here. Again, I press circle, NURBS circle 1. Then I'm going to go to my MASH network here. Which was the offset. Let me see, influence. Click on my follow-up object. Okay, so I'm on my follow-up MASH 1 offset shape. I had selected to do a NURBS curve. Then I made my circle. And the way I'm going to connect this particular circle to the offset, I'm going to go over it on my outliner with a middle mouse. I'm going to click and drag it to the shape in here. Now I can select my circle and I can see how this is actually rotating my objects. This is being used as an influencer, basically. Now let's turn on the influence. Again, the influence comes with a node, and I can click and drag across. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use an animation. I'm going to move from here across from to there. So frame 1, you can see. I'm going to go to my channels. I'm going to select all my channels, right click on it, key selected, then on key 250. Select my object. Go across and key selected. Oh, sorry, that didn't do that. Let me see. Start over. Time. So let's give it that influence. Now this, remember that this line here is separate from that effect, right? So okay. So what we can do now, I'm going to select now make a new box. I'm going to scale that, but the size of that, I'm going to select my repro mesh, and I'm going to make that mesh, that repro mesh, a mesh network. So that's mesh 2. So once I select that, it has its distribution. Right now it has 10 of them. Right, you can see. Instead of linear, I'm going to go to mesh. Now it's asking me here, mesh, please connect the mesh. And I'm going to take my cube, which is P cube 2. I'm going to input that under my input mesh here. So I'm going to drag P cube to that. And the method of distribution on my mesh simply means this box. It's going to be face center, which means that it's going to put one mesh network on each of the faces of my cube, which is in this case 6. So now I'm going to play my animation. I can hide my cube here. Okay. I also have my circle that I can always animate as well. So there's two different animations happening at the same time. I can stop it here. And you can see how that's influencer. You can also even go back to my influencer node and scale that. Go to influence. I can control the influence of that power, the radius. That scale, or I can even have rotations. So you can see that everything is interconnected between those nodes. So what we can do going forward is actually choosing another geometry that I've actually selected, made a different geometry, and instead of using a cube, I applied mesh network onto this new surface. So I'm going to hide this for a sec. I applied some material to it. Before I move it, I can show you that effect. You can see that this travels along that surface. Along this surface here. So I'm selecting that object. As such, if you apply some material, you can see the different changes of that skin here. So what we covered is to a basic understanding of MASH, how the nodes are attached, connected, and how two MASH networks are interconnected even more to create a longer variation. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the class.